Hi, I'm Carrie, and this is Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons, a comic novel which came out in 1932, was hugely successful at the time, has been filmed a couple of times, once for TV, once as a movie with Kate Beckinsale in 1995. I haven't seen it, unfortunately. Now, it has stood the test of time as a comic novel. It is still funny. It is very well written. It has a wonderful lead character in the form of Flora Post, a young woman in London who has recently lost her parents and is determined to live with one of her relatives as a young privileged girl should, and sort of live off them. And so she sorts through her various existing relatives and decides to go and live with the Starkadders, who live on a farm in Sussex. And the reason why is because whimsically, she feels that they're a family that needs to be sorted out. Now, it turns out that the Starkadders are let's say, a very rural and backward bunch, ruled over by a matriarch named Aunt Ada Doom. What follows is a fish out of water story, except the twist in this one is the fish, in this case, Flora Post, takes command of things. Now, normally in fish out of water comedies, the humor comes from watching the fish character try and adapt to new circumstances and fail and flail and generally have misadventures, all in, of course, in a humorous vein. In this case, the Starkadders must succumb to the will of Flora Post, who cannot be stopped in any of her efforts to straighten out the various problems these rather melodramatic characters have. Because this is the novel is also a parody of a kind of novel which was evidently popular in Britain at the time, the rural melodrama. Something I am not familiar with, although she was also making fun of writers like D.H. Lawrence and Thomas Hardy, setting stories in rural areas in which passions run large and there are terrible secrets being kept. So it works very well as a comic novel. It works brilliantly, in fact. It's still quite funny. Now, there's two things about it that bear mentioning. The first is it's almost well disguised if you skip over a little short foreword written by the author in which she says, this story is set in the near future. I don't know why she made that decision, but it will explain why there's a couple of odd references to the Anglo-Nicaraguan Wars of 1946, even though the book is written in 32. And also, at one point, she uses apparently some kind of TV phone to contact a friend of hers. That's it. Those are the only sort of future references in it, and it's a failing, I guess, of the novel that she unnecessarily decides to set it in the future, because there's absolutely no effect on the plot or on the characters. It's just bizarre. The other thing to note is that there's some passages, at least in this edition, the Penguin one, that seem to be as paragraphs that are marked out with a triple asterisk at the front of them. Evidently in the original edition, these passages, the entire passage was printed in italics to indicate that it is a straight up parody of a particular style of writing in these rural melodramas. These are not italicized in the Penguin edition, which just makes it very confusing because tonally they are significantly different than the rest of what you're reading. Last of all, and not very pleasantly, we have an example in this novel of casual racism, not terribly uncommon in novels written before World War II. In this case, it's just a passing anti-Semitic remark that is just strange in its randomness, in which the author, not one of the characters, mentions that one of the characters bought something at, quote unquote, a Jew shop. You hit that when you're reading it, and it's a real speed bump because you're wondering, why on earth would she say something like that? Why does that need to be indicated? But it's not, if you read enough literature written, and the further back you go, it becomes more obvious, but certainly in the 30s, there were still things like The Great Gatsby has some strongly anti-Semitic passages, as does Hemingway. So it's not a shock, but anytime you do encounter it, it is surprising. So it is good, very funny. It will make you laugh. So that's Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. And my novel, The Skeleton Palms, a noir thriller, and I'm not sure if it'll make you laugh. It's very violent, very dark, but if that tickles your fancy, go for it. Thanks. Bye.